this, I covered over to, going from the right to the left, we covered over as far as the administrator pull-down menu, and I did actually start to do a few things here. Now, what I'm going to do is just kind of flip on through, relatively briefly in terms of some of the things we've quickly covered within here, because this is all the technical end of it. If you're a salesperson who's looking at this, it's a good thing to just kind of let your brain kind of step back one notch and just kind of absorb it in terms of the different functions that are available in there and where they're located. You don't necessarily need to know every bell and whistle and field that happens to be in there. If you are an installer or a support tech, then by all means pay good attention from this point on, because this is where all of the real nitty-gritty of the programming takes place, and I'll be walking through all of the different things within here. So first of all, I'm going to jump us back into system setup, and let's just take a really quick look at what we've got here. I've covered off several of the different tabs, and then we are ready to carry on across. But what I want to do is just kind of briefly reiterate some of the key things that we've got up to this point. Now, within the first tab we have here is system. All of this is basically high-end stuff that applies to the overall operation of the system, how the end of days run, and so on like that. These little check boxes down here are very powerful because they open up the interface between PixelPoint and these respective applications as well. So you always want to make sure that you pay close attention to that. Coming over to the next one we have is taxes. Taxes are a very important thing to get right. The reason being is that if you get it wrong, and for any reason a restaurant is not charging taxes appropriately, if they're ever audited, this could come back on you, and you really don't want that to happen. So that being the case, make sure that when it comes to applying taxes to any given site, make sure that you are well acquainted with the local tax laws of that area, and work with them, to make sure that everything is copacetic that way as well. But that being said, then you've got the proper descriptions put in, the proper tax rates, and if there are any funky tax laws as well, I should point out that the way we handle those weird tax laws is through the use of a DLL. That's a Dynamic Link Library file. You'll find within the Pixel POS folder, there's actually a subfolder in there called DLLs, and in that you would put in all of the like a regional DLL that would apply to the tax laws of that given state or province or country. And then you would modify a file called pixel32.ini. INI is a configuration file. That's also located within the Pixel POS folder. And in there you change the line that pertains to the taxes on that. Now, all this information is available within the MyPart website pertaining to modification of taxes and so on. So I'll refer to that, but I'm just kind of giving you the brief overview of the process to do that. Having done that, then what it will do is it will not only take the taxes that you've applied within here, but it will also incorporate all of those different circumstances so that if it's above or below X number of dollars, then it'll do this, that, and the other thing. Now, this is not required across the board for a lot of places. Like we have one for California, we have one for Ohio, we have one for Ontario, we have one for the Philippines, one for France, and so on like that. So there's different ones that are out there pertaining to different regions. And if for any reason our taxation does not properly apply to any given region you're working on, contact PAR support and identify what it is. Now, you may also need to provide some taxation documentation, some government documentation identifying, yes, this is the way we require it here. If the system doesn't do that, then they are obligated to do something to help you out to try and get the taxes working right for that given region. Down below that, we have these common unit. This is for clients who may be in countries that do rounding of their dollars. For example, the country of Australia does not use cents. It rounds up to the nearest nickel. So if that is the case, you can program in things like that. The company info information is for one reason used for reporting purposes, just to identify this particular establishment, but also it is used for providing address information for things such as warehouses, if you're working with multiple warehouses, some of which may be off-site, and also if you're using it for delivery drivers as well. It will use this information for the mapping system, and this will be the anchor point, and then from here all of your deliveries will be from this point outward. All right, the next one over is POS Reports. Now within POS Reports, we have three areas that are within here. The first one is cash out reports. So this is the employee cash out. At the end of the shift, they run their cash out report. This is the report that is generated. It's an RPT file. If I select on the little drop-down box, and it keeps taking me to the wrong folder, Here, let me go down to the Pixel POS folder. And within here, we have, I have somewhere within here we go, Pixel Reports. This is the folder that you want to refer to, the subfolder within the Pixel POS folder. And here we have all of the RPT files. Now, an RPT file is basically a Crystal Reports file. And everything pertaining to back office and front end that would be generated through either Report Viewer or through the software would be located within this folder here. One thing I want to point out as well is that there is a built-in filter that's on this, which is SQL POS and then the name of the report. Just a little reminder here that if the name of the report begins with SQL POS, then it's a 40-column narrow carriage receipt printer front-end report. If it just begins with SQL and then the name of the report, then it's an 8.5 by 11, 80-column back office report. Okay, that's how we differentiate the two between there. But anyway, if you need to make a change to the conventional cash out report that is being provided, then you can select on anything here, and if you want to add in additional ones, just hold down the Control key on your keyboard and click on the desired reports. They will all show up within here, and when you click on Open, then they will all be applied within this line right here. Coming down below that, we also have the end-of-day report that is generated. This is the SQL POS end-of-day report. This is a really great report. Just make sure you've got that handy there. But again, if you need to add in any additional reports as well, then you can click on Add Report, and they will tack on to the end of that as well. And then, if you recall, within the front end, we went into Manager, Sales Functions, and there was actually some front-end reports that were available within there. And within this, you can also add in additional ones if you wish within here. Just make sure that you've got Crystal Reports version 11 or compatible to be able to do this. All right, now I think roughly we ended off around here. If not this one, it was the next tab, and that's preset reports. So I'll just briefly go through this one. It's pretty straightforward. Within here, we have all of these quick close buttons here. I know that we did cover this as well. And when you're closing off a transaction, if the customer gave you like a $50 bill or a $100 bill, then you can actually just settle it really quickly using a one-punch button like this. Now, if they gave you like $150 with a $100 bill and a $50 bill, you would not use necessarily this for that. Its purpose is really just to offer a quick closing using a single button like that, and then from there it'll tell you what your change is and so on. This little checkbox up here will close it to cash. It will assume that the button you select below, being the preset payment button, is being closed to cash. If you work with an establishment that works with multiple currencies, such as, let's say, the euro and sterling, for example, then you may want to uncheck that. This way, if they give you 100 euro or 100 pounds, then you are able to differentiate one from the other. You select on the 100, and then off to the right, where they've got all the different methods of payment, that's where you would choose whether it's sterling or euro. Coming to the right of that, we also have Allow Pay-ins and Payouts. Pretty self-explanatory. If you have this checked, then the Pay-in and Payout function buttons will appear within the Your Settings screen, allowing your staff to perform pay-ins and payouts. If you want to remove that capability, just uncheck that button. And then down below that, we have tender balancing, which I touched on as well. This is the process of where you go into your till or your server banking receptacle, whatever it happens to be. And from here, you count out as far as what you've got for cash, what you've got for Visa, for MasterCard, for whatever that you're taking for methods of payment, all of your tenders. And then from there, you punch in those numbers into the system, and it will calculate whether you're over or short on any one of those particular methods of payment, and identify that within your cash out report. Now, this can be performed either as part of the employee cash out process, if you have it checked on this, which is it's set to this by default. Then if you do activate tender balancing, I'll show you how to do that later on in this session, then those methods of payment will show up on a whole separate screen as part of your cash out process. If you select it on balance on end of day, then actually there will be a tender balance button that shows up within the sales function of sales manager, sales functions, and then you'll see a tender balance button in there. In which case then the manager who is performing the end of day process can actually perform a tender balance for the overall establishment. So you have your choice of either one. Okay. Coming over to orders now. Orders is divided off into three general sections. The first one we have here is future orders. This is where you go about programming how future orders will work on the system. If you do not program any of this, then there will be no future order capability. Now, a future order is basically where a member of some kind, it can be a reservation, a takeout order, a delivery order, whatever it happens to be, can actually apply within the system to say, I want to have this order delivered or picked up on a certain time, or maybe even within a certain date as well. And within here, this is where you go with programming that. If you walk through each one of these. Now, the first one, it says here, orders will be processed this number of minutes before the scheduled time. So what this means is that when you place an order, let's say we want it for 6 o'clock tonight, okay, and I'll come in and pick up my order of fish and chips. Then the order will be processed or print in the kitchen 15 minutes before that time. Okay, so the member, Scott, calls up, I want to place an order for pickup. It'll be an order of fish and chips, and I want it for 6 o'clock tonight. Then at 5:45, quarter to 6, the order will actually be printed in the kitchen. And at that time, they'll go about making it. It'll be hot and fresh and ready to go for 6 o'clock. Order must be scheduled at least this many hours into the future. Now, I've got a one in here. So, for example, you don't want to use a future order for something where the guy says, I'm going to be there in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something like that. So, if that is the case, then you can put in a minimum time for that, a minimum allowable time for it. Order can be scheduled no more than this many hours into the future. Now, if this field is set to 0, then that means that this whole functionality will be disabled. There will be no future order capability on the system. Now, you can set this to any maximum length of time you want to allow for this. If I only want to allow, let's say, for orders that can be processed within the current day, then I may want to put in like 8 or 12 hours or something like that. But you can go way beyond that as well. As you see within here, I've got 9,999 hours, which means you can now program future orders for future days as well. So it could be for tomorrow or for Friday, for example. And the system will actually be intuitive enough to allow for that as well. If you do have a program for that, these open checks, okay, so it's a future order, but it's also an open check, and the system will not interfere with the end-of-day process. PixelPoint is intuitive enough to understand that if it's set as a future order, then don't let it halt the processing of the end-of-day, where you normally have to have, all checks are closed, everyone's cashed out, clocked out, and so on. And if you've got a future order in there for Friday at 6 o'clock, yes, that check is open, but because it's flagged as future order, it will not interfere with that end-of-day process. Now, if the check is settled within the current day, then the funds for that check will be within the current day, but the inventory depletion and the actual recording of the sale itself, in terms of products and so on, will not occur until that particular date has come and gone, in which case then the customer's picked up their goods. All right, coming down below that, we have auto gratuity. Now, auto gratuity is basically programming the system where, based on certain criteria, you can have an automatic gratuity charged to a check. And so this is how it works. First of all, the first thing we have here is auto gratuity charge. 15 equals 15%, for example, just as an example. So whatever your gratuity would be for this that you want to apply, you just pop in the number in there, and that will be the percentage based on the check. That's the way we do it within auto gratuity. There's not a flat rate using this form of calculation here. Now, there are two criteria for this that the system is going to look to. The first one is when the number of customers is greater than or equal to whatever it happens to be. And it will look to that, but also look to when the amount of the check is greater than or equal to whatever it happens to be. Now, take a look at how I program this right now. The first one, when the number of customers is greater than or equal to. Now, if you leave that blank, it's going to assume 0, which means as long as you got a customer on there, it's going to charge the gratuity. If you want, you can put in, okay, I need at least 5 customers before I'm going to charge you the auto gratuity on it. So you want to put a 5 in there. If it really doesn't matter to the establishment in terms of how many customers, but it does matter to them in terms of the amount of the check, then you can program it to something like this here, where I put in a value that will never be attained. Okay, there will never be 9,999 customers seated at one table, and but it will actually exceed the amount of $200. So if that is the case, then this will only look to $200. But you can reverse this logic as well. If I got 5 or more customers and I don't care about the amount of the check, then you can put in a really large amount for the amount of the check. So you can work either way. Or if it can be, if there's more than 5 customers or more than $200 on the check, then apply the gratuity. You can program it that way as well. Coming over to the right-hand side, we also have Calculate Gratuity. Now this has to do, again, with your local tax laws, before taxes or after taxes. So if taxes are going to be incorporated into that particular calculation, then you may want to identify whether it would be before or after taxes on that. The next thing here is Enforce Gratuity Amount when closing check. Now on this, because there's a couple of ways that this can be handled on here. I, for example, am going into the check and I'm ordering things, and as soon as I've passed $200, then it's going to bang kick on the 15% gratuity. But if I want, because there may be other things such as coupons and discounts and so on like that that may be applied as well, I may want to check on Enforce the Gratuity Amount when closing the check, in which case then it will wait until the final closing of the check, and whatever the bottom line total is on it, that's what it will calculate on at that time. Also, allow coupon to lower gratuity as well. Now by selecting on this, then if there is, like I've got a 2-for-1 coupon or something like that, then that may also need to affect in terms of the calculation of that 15% gratuity as well. So do you want to incorporate coupons into that or not? Okay. Also, let me back up on one more thing. As far as the enforcing of the gratuity, I should point this out. When you leave this unchecked, and in most cases you're going to leave this unchecked, what's going to happen here is that the gratuity will be calculated as a suggested gratuity. Okay, will not be forced. And for a lot of places, at least in North America, this is the way it works, is that I can print off the check. Here's what the total is. Here's what the total would be if you were nice enough to put on 15%. And so that's showed on there, but it does not force that. The enforced gratuity amount, what this will do when you select on this as well, is that it will actually force the bottom line total that I was referring to earlier to include that gratuity. So you must pay that. If you do not pay the gratuity, you have not paid the entire check. This is legal in some areas. In a lot of areas within North America, this would not be applicable. All right, coming down below that, we have course prefixes. Now, PixelPoint can work with multiple courses, okay? So I've got appetizers, main course, dessert, and if I'm ordering in that particular way as well, because it depends on the form of table service, if I do break it out by courses, then you can actually have these little prefixes show up as well. Now, the prefixes, you may recall, if I ordered like a salad, and on the order screen, it showed up with a little A next to it. If I ordered the steak dinner, it showed up with an M next to that. If I ordered the pie, it had a little D next to it. And those symbols also show up or reflected across within the table layouts as well. So all that's available within there. But I should point out, take a look at this. If I click on this, I've got appetizer, main course, other course, and dessert. And that takes up the first few courses that are available in the system. But I actually have up to 10 courses that you can program within a PixelPoint system. So for example, some Asian restaurants, if you go and you may have like a 7-course Japanese meal or something like that. And if that is the case, you can actually break down all of those courses into PixelPoint as well and have them all properly identified and laid out that way. And if you're doing something like hold and fire within the system, this is where I've got all my appetizers and then I'm going to fire those off. The way the hold and fire process works, it works with these courses as well. There's a window that will come up with all the courses, and from there I can select on appetizer and fire them off, and so all the appetizers will go across. And then the next time I go back in, I can say main course, fire them off. Or if you're doing a 7-course meal, course 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can shoot them off in the proper sequence that way as well. You can also skip down the list as well. So if there's like a 3rd or 4th course and you want to do 2 courses or 3 courses at the same time, just go to the bottom one that you want to send that off, and it'll scoot them on through. Or you can actually send them in different orders as well. The main course may take a long time, so I want to send that off now so that they can start working on it, and then in a couple of minutes I'll send off the appetizers, which will just take a couple of minutes to do. In any case, within any one of these, you can actually change the prefix that shows up in there. If you don't want a single A, for example, I can put in app or apps or appetizer or A1 or something like that. You can put in anything you want for that. Just bear in mind that the more you put in with that prefix, the less you'll have available for other typing that's available on the line when it prints out in the kitchen. Defaults. Now, within older versions of PixelPoint, there were certain functions in here that we had a little bit of problem trying to upgrade and convert across with new functionality. One of these happened to be within split commands. Okay, split such as seat 1 of 2, seat 2 of 2, or split 1 of 2, split 2 of 2, like within pizzas, for example. It was having problems trying to bring this across to the printer in the kitchen. And so what we did is we actually tagged it to a specific type of product that we created in the system. We hard-coded it in there, and you just use this to kind of set that up so that it would treat that as a product when it printed it out. The same with the seating position, as it said, seat 1 of 2, seat 2 of 2. And so we created those and identified them within here. As far as what you need to do within here, you don't need to do anything from this point on. We're so far into the new versions now that basically any of the programming that's required within here, you can just leave it as it is. You'll never have to change any of this stuff. Coming over to the next one here, we have collaboration. Now, collaboration allows you to collaborate with, let's say, a corporate office, for example. You may recall, I'm just going to jump out.